Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vasa. Welcome to Week in Review. This is a video that we put out here to Dice Hour each week, which is an index of all our videos we put out over the past week. We tell you a little bit about them, and then if you want to watch the whole video, check the show notes of this video, and there's a link to it. So let's get going.
Hey everybody, I'm Garcia. Here's what I reviewed last week. So I reviewed Monster Island, King of Monster Island, which I gave a 7 out of 10 to. This is a cooperative version of King of Tokyo, King of New York. It's that vibe. I thought there were a lot of rules from one to the other one. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of time between those, right? So if you've played King of New York and you liked that way back when that came out, or King of Tokyo even longer ago, by now, if you kept sort of progressing with your gaming interests, you probably are very much ready to jump into this one. If you go right from one, having learned it last week, really enjoying King of Tokyo, and suddenly you're like, ooh, King of Monster Island, what's this? It's a lot of rules. And it's a little fiddly, but I really enjoyed the cooperation in it. To be fair, my favorite count was actually solitaire. But you still get to sort of cooperate with yourself by leaving things behind and then coming back around and scooping them up. It's got a cool look. It's got some neat ideas, and I did enjoy it. It's just not the most straightforward co-op game I've ever played. I reviewed Rustling Leaves, which I gave a 7 to as well. This one is a roll and write style game with a couple of neat ideas. This idea of having an entire grid, and your die roll selects parameters for you to pick a grouping of tokens, of tiles, and then you can only from within that set select one kind, and that's what you score. Seems like a different idea than a lot of other roll and writes in which you're simply writing down numbers on tracks and that sort of thing. It's got a cool look. It comes with 4 seasonal pads in there, so it's kind of like 4 little games in one, and I think that lends it a lot of vitality and replayability, so I enjoyed it. I reviewed The Wolves, which I also rated a 7 out of 10. This one has some really nice progression to the gameplay. I like that at the beginning of the game you are doing very different things than what you are doing at the end. You'll be spreading out your group of wolves. You'll be taking over wolves and growing your pack. You will be unlocking various things, controlling areas as they are about to score, hopefully scooping in there right before to surprise your opponents. The game play is quite abstracted, though. I mean, very abstract. I expect most games to be abstracted to a degree. This one feels very much so. And I thought the visual clarity is a little tricky sometimes on the board. Some of the ideas, some of the things you are trying to do take some processing, because not everything is as one-to-one as I expect it to be. Still, the game is very well produced, and it's a neat idea. It's got a cool theme to it that doesn't come through, but it's there in the window dressing. And my main thing being that progression really works well. All right, I reviewed Neuroshima Hex Army, brand new one, or pretty new one, called Beasts, which I rate an 8 out of 10. Very cool idea here with these monstrous sort of unleashed creatures that are part biological, part mechanical, weird creations. And they are ferocious. They will attack everything, including their own unit. So that's the main twist here. That if you are placing one of your units next to another one, and that unit has friendly fire, so to speak, you might take out your own pieces. It's cool because it makes them dangerous to everybody, and they are sort of ramped up, tuned up to really be dangerous. But your opponent could use that against you yourself. And if you're not careful, you'll do that. So, really cool idea. I love this army. And lastly, I reviewed Revive, which I rated an 8 out of 10. I thought that was a low score. This is a really thinky Euro-style game. It takes a little bit of a hit for me because the promise of the theme was very cool. It's supposed to be this post-apocalyptic world in which you are reviving the land, rebuilding the world. That really does not come through in this one. But I like the idea. I like the mechanics in it are fun. It's a really punchy game. You definitely feel like you are building up your possibilities. You know, utilizing one card at the beginning of the game will get you a couple of things. Doing it towards the end of the game, when you've built that up, really feels impactful. And you unlock abilities. You feel like you are progressively getting better and better at what you do. So it's a really fun game. I very much enjoyed it. If it had had a couple of things that felt a little more thematic, this would have been even higher for me. So there you go. That's it for me. I'll see you on the next one.
Hey, everybody. This is Chris. This week I had a really good week. Starting off with The Wolves, which I gave a 7.5, my lowest score for the week. The Wolves is a neat take on area majority with a very abstract kind of game driver, but I like what's going on. The theme didn't really appeal to me out the gate, but I like what the game did and won me over. I would recommend it 7.5. Next up, Catherine, The Cities of the Tzarina. This is a game that is... I gave an 8. It's basically a small box card game. It has a very fun, clever card mechanism. It has an overly sized board. It looks stretched out and jumbo for kind of no reason. I feel like it comes in too big of a box. But the game, the card play is really fun, really engaging. I've played it a lot and taught it a lot to people. So it gets an 8 from me. Next up, The Great Split. The greatest of splits. I split, you choose. But it's a double I split you choose thing going on that gets an 8 from me because it has fantastic production. It looks really charming, looks really good out on the table. There's just a lot of nice touches. You get a guaranteed movement on all these tracks, and then you have to split up these cards into different arrays, and you're trying to guess what the other person would want to take and leave you. And then at the same time, you are handed a pack of cards. You have to take some and leave some for the other person. So good, very elegant. I like the little wallets and just great production. 8 out of 10 for me. Next up and lastly, Resist. This is a solo war game that I gave, a solo historical game I gave a 9. I am really enamored with this one. I think the design team did a great job of making something that evokes a lot of character. This little deck of cards evokes more character for me than the biggest of productions with lots of miniatures and stretch goals and all that stuff. This is just a small box, self-contained solo game that I find so good. It's hard to describe. It's a bit of a deck management. It almost has that Gloomhaven thing where you can play cards for a strong ability, but their one-time use, they'll go away. Or we can play them for a small guaranteed ability that you get to continue to reshuffle into your deck. So good. If this at all interests you, I highly recommend you check it out. We did a couple of other things around the Dice Tower, including a Halloween Horror Nights travel vlog. Why? Well, just because sometimes we want to, as an office, go out and blow some steam. So if you want to see our silly antics, I edited that together. We did a lot of great stuff this week. So that's been it from me.
Reviews, I did some of them. That is The Great Split was the first one I did. This is a 7.5 for me. I split you choose. Real cool way, I just like how fast the game is. I know it's mostly movement tracks, there's no real theme, but it is cool drafting and trying to like get ahead of your opponents that are on both sides of you. It's a lot of fun. Then also I took a look at King of Monster Island. I enjoy King of Tokyo a lot. This is like a cooperative King of Tokyo. There is a little bit more added into the game, having to do the whole enemy phase, but I really enjoyed the cooperation in this game. I gave this an 8. I thought it was a lot of fun. Played it a bunch of times, and I just really enjoy the nuances to the game. So that is the games I looked at this week.
Greetings, Earth creatures. Hey folks, I'm Jeff, and this week I took a look at Star Eater. Now this was a small indie published game out of Australia, and it's a arena-style space-based combat game where 2 to maybe 4 players are piloting these massive capital ships bristling with weapons, fleets of maneuverable fighters, point defense systems, and more. It also uses this interesting inertial-based movement system where your ships are kind of coasting through space, and each round you're making minute adjustments to their direction and heading, all while trying to pepper at each other round to round, playing 2 cards to activate various systems on your ship. I thought that the gameplay here was pretty clever and interesting, but it was marred a bit by a lot of fiddle factor and also some often hard to read iconography. But I do think that this game will really play well for the right audience. And so because of that, I gave it a 6.5. Now to see more of my thoughts of Star Eater, check out the review here on the channel. Cheers.
Hey there everybody, it's Mike DeLisio, and this week I reviewed 4 games. First up, we've got Revive. This is a very hot new Euro game coming from Essen that I gave a 7 out of 10 to. It's a game that I recommend, but for for some reason, this game has more of a thematic disconnect for me than many other Euro games. It has a theme that I love. It's kind of a post-apocalyptic theme of trying to rebuild your tribe. And I just wish that there was more thematic connection between what you're doing and what the theme is. It left me a little bit cold, although it's a very, very solid mechanically Euro game. So you may not have as much of a problem with that thematic disconnection as I did. Still recommend it with a 7. Next up is Rustling Leaves, which is a roll and write game from designer Paolo Mori. I gave this a 7.5 out of 10. There are a lot of roll and write games out there, and this one is not necessarily the most innovative in what you're doing, but I really like the little touches that it has. The being able to bow out when you want to and not having a fixed end of your game. The 4 different season boards, so to speak, which are just paper sheets, and how it's just slight variations on the mechanics of the game. So once you know the game, you're not having to relearn a new game, but there's enough difference from one season to another to keep it compelling and interesting. I also reviewed The Great Split, which I also gave a 7.5 out of 10. It's a game with a beautiful aesthetic, and it is centered around the I split, you choose mechanism, which I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite mechanisms in games. It's underutilized, and really this game is all about that. So that alone is going to get a recommendation for me, is that it's a very condensed I split, you choose. The goes with, which are basically that you're using the cards in this I split you choose mechanic or mechanism, is to move up tracks. And those tracks are a little less compelling to me, a little bit too spreadsheet-like, very clearly mathematical. Not as compelling, but still overall a really good product. Last up is Resist, which I'm giving an 8.5 out of 10, a seal of excellence. This is a solo-only, card-driven game with a historical theme of a resistance in a wartime. Really, really spectacular game. It's a fantastic looking game, first of all, with large tarot-sized cards, so you can see that art in all of its beauty. But it's also a very clever game mechanically, where you are having to play cards to complete missions, and there are multiple loss conditions. There also is a campaign element to the game that you can choose to include if you want to, or you can just play as one-off scenarios. A really, really spectacular solo game that is Resist. All right, well, that's it for me this week. Let's keep it moving.
Okay, so for me, first of all, there's Teeter Tower. A lot of 6s here. Teeter Tower is a game you stack cards and dice. An interesting idea, it just doesn't work out as well as I would like it to. The Transcontinental, this is a big, heavy game, a worker placement game, which I love the concept of it. Placing workers as the train moves to the west and then to the east, and it goes back and forth, and getting resources. But there's a couple problems that keep me from liking it as much, only giving it a 6. 1, terrible, terrible rulebook. 2, there's just so much analysis paralysis possible in this game. This game really slows to a crawl, and you know, there's just the decisions that people make will change so much as to what you do. So there's just a lot of stoppage in the game. In the palm of your hand, this is another party game where you're putting things on someone's hand while they sleep, dropping different items on it, and then they pick a card that matches it. It's a cute idea and it's fun, but it's not something I want to play over and over again, so that's also a 6. Alien Pet Shop, a worker placement game with dice as you are feeding different aliens, but the reason I'm only giving this one a 6 is because the dice are simply too random. Cheating Moth. Okay, now we're up to 7s. This is a 7 for me. My kids love it, though. An Uno-style game, but you can make any card disappear by cheating. Throw it on the floor, throw it out the window, whatever. Wok and Roll. This is a roll and write style game where you're filling in different recipes based on dice that are rolled. This is kind of a standard fare roll and write game, but I love the theme, which made me give it a 7. Duos, a party game where there's a grid of 12 and you're trying to pick pairs in that group. A lot of fun with different themes in it. You can see my review for which theme I like the best, 7 out of 10. The Great Split. This is a 7 out of 10. You think I would give it a higher score, but I really do like the game. It's just that I don't want to play it over and over because it's the same thing. But an I split, you choose mechanism and drafting, a good combo. Ticket to Ride Ghost Train. This is a great version of Ticket to Ride for young kids with a Halloween style theme. 7 out of 10. King of Monster Island. This is a cooperative version of King of Tokyo. A bit more complex, but very fun. Simple for complex gamers like me, but just a lot of theme and big monsters, and there's a lot of cool things going on in it. 8 out of 10. And then Revive. What a fantastic game Revive is. I'm a real big fan of this one. Revive is a card game where you use the top of the card or the bottom of the cards and actions. It's very much just a combination of mechanisms, but I really love it. 9 out of 10. We also did our normal stuff this week where I do my look back for the first time. I've done a look back where I went back 20 years for reviews that I've done. We played a couple games live, including on Thursday. We played a bunch of party games. And we had our third episode of Board Game Smorgasbord, Board Game Breakfast, a live Q&A, and more. You can check all this stuff out on our channel. Until next time, I'm Tom Vessel, and you've been watching Week in Review on the Dice Tower.